Hello, everyone. It's Eric from Strong Medicine and Stanford University. This is a health and medicine channel, but about once a year, some topic outside of medicine captures my attention enough for me to want to discuss it. Today, that's the varied dangers from AI, specifically, those dangers that not enough people are talking about. The reason I've been thinking about this is partly the same as everyone else. In the last 6 months, there has been either a rapid increase in the progress of AI, or what's probably more accurate, a sudden shift in the public's direct access to this technology via chatbots like ChatGPT and text to image tools like DALL-E 2 and Midjourney. I've also been working on some research on the use of chatbots in medicine, and I've seen how fast the ability of AI to contribute to patient care has improved. In fact, the technology is advancing so quickly that by the time our first work based on GPT-3 was submitted and making its way through peer review, GPT-4 was made available, and editors told us that our original manuscript was already obsolete. So I'll drop a link in the description if anyone is interested in the scope of what we were looking at 2 months ago. In the meantime, I've been reading and viewing more opinions in this broad space, and all of this has me worried that the world is not prepared for how AI is about to transform it. And I'm not just talking about medicine, I'm talking about everything. Of course, thinking a lot about AI over the last several months certainly does not make me remotely an expert on this topic. So feel free to approach my discussion on this with some skepticism. When you hear the term danger and artificial intelligence in the same sentence, the immediate image that many people have is one of a seemingly malevolent, sentient superintelligence which is trying to deliberately kill humans to achieve some awful goal. Not so much ChatGPT, but rather Skynet from the Terminator films or Ava from the criminally underappreciated Ex Machina. Whether or not one sees such scenarios as plausible, malevolent general AI is not an under-recognized threat. So I'm not going to be talking about it more today. Another existential threat from AI is the possibility of a general AI superintelligence accidentally wiping out humanity while trying to perform a specific task that lacked adequate safeguards. Well, one example of this, given by philosopher Nick Bostrom, is the idea that an AI tasked with calculating pi to the furthest possible extreme could determine that the optimal way to do so was to construct factories churning out computational nanobots that eventually cover the entire surface of the Earth. And once such a process was underway, it might be literally impossible to stop, as a superintelligent AI would counter any attempts at shutting it down, not out of self-preservation, but rather because that would necessarily interfere with achieving its primary goal of calculating pi. Human extinction as a side effect of solving a math problem may sound like a side plot from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but many people far smarter on this than I am are seriously worried about it. Yet another threat, one is far less catastrophic, is an excessively rapid disruption of the job market and the economy more broadly. In essence, the idea that AI is going to take over jobs, in particular, white-collar jobs. While I don't imagine that AI will directly steal jobs from people, people who optimally utilize AI will force those who do not from the workplace. But again, this shift in the job market is also nothing that 1,000 articles haven't already talked about. So instead, today, I'm going to focus on those threats that I don't think we are talking about enough. And I see there being 4. I'm going to go through them starting from the most concrete and moving to the more subtle or abstract. None of these are going to be as immediately fascinating or sexy as autonomous nanobot swarms, but it's still really important for us to discuss them. First, bad actors utilizing AI to achieve otherwise unachievable, nefarious goals. AI doesn't just make humans more efficient, it can also help us perform tasks previously beyond our skill sets. Maybe it sounds hard to believe that one could use a general chatbot like ChatGPT for doing something dangerous, but generative AI has been shown to be capable of doing everything from creating tax scams to discovering biochemical weapons. ChatGPT is remarkably adept at coding. It's easy for me to imagine someone with a basic background in coding using AI to create a computer virus or malware that they otherwise were not skilled enough to create. With ChatGPT, OpenAI has created guardrails and limits to what people can ask of it, sometimes to comical extents. However, there is plenty of online advice on how to circumvent these safeguards. Plus, there are no government regulations preventing another company from developing a chatbot which deliberately lacks these safeguards, or a rogue state developing one. And also, within this concern, there's the issue of deepfakes, the process of creating fake but realistic photos and eventually videos and audios of real people. It's true that passable deepfake videos of politicians and celebrities already exist, and they haven't yet upended society, but currently they require time and a non-trivial level of expertise to create. As AI improves, the ability to create deepfakes will become accessible to a growing number of people, including those who actively seek to spread misinformation. Unless deliberate action is taken to prevent this, the social media landscape may become so flooded with deepfake videos created with malevolent intent that most people, not just the fringes like we have now, but actually most people, will no longer trust online content from reputable news sources, resulting in them relying even more on their internal biases for understanding the world around them. This brings me to the second under-discussed threat of AI, the loss of objective truth. For generations, despite propaganda and misinformation, there have been relatively objective and easily accessible ways to establish whether or not a given fact-based claim is true. A television pundit makes a claim about what a law does or doesn't allow. Look up the law in the government database and read the text yourself. A scientific paper references a specific established fact. Look up the reference and see if it actually supports the claim. A politician asserts they didn't say or do something offensive. Find the video. AI is starting to disrupt our ability to unambiguously prove or disprove a fact-based statement. I just mentioned one facet of this, deepfakes, but it is a far more complex issue. Consider the difference between information provided by Google versus ChatGPT. If I want to know something like, does acupuncture work? I can enter that into Google either as the full question or as individual search terms, and Google will provide thousands of individual results. While the Google algorithm will order those results based on predicted relevance and reliability, as the user searching for an answer, you can still see the individual sources of information. You can click on the result, you can read precisely what that result says, what the web page says, what it concludes, what it claims. You can see what that result sources are if they offer them. And ultimately, you can determine what you believe to be that one search result's reliability. And if you either find them unreliable or your search requires comparing multiple different perspectives, you can return to your search results and keep looking. In short, you retain the ability to appraise the evidence. With ChatGPT, you don't get thousands of results. You don't get sources. You get one answer. That answer may explicitly incorporate multiple perspectives, particularly on an issue that lacks a strong consensus or which is known to be controversial. But it is still just one answer. And more importantly, there are no references. Not only does ChatGPT not provide references, they don't really exist in any conventional way. Generative AI chatbots, based on large language models, they don't compare and contrast different pieces of evidence and determine what is most accurate based on its understanding of the world. They only create human-like language based on predictions of what words are the most probable to follow user prompts based on whatever data it was trained on. What is actually true is irrelevant to ChatGPT, but because of the way it provides a single, very fluent and coherently stated response, it gives a false impression of authority. It will trick people into thinking its responses are based on truth, even when it completely fabricates information. For example, if I asked it to create a biography for physician and medical YouTuber Eric Strong, it creates a very reasonable and believable one, but none of the hard details in its response are true, with the exception that I was born and raised in the United States. Some people have said that chatbots will not replace traditional internet searches. But I actually disagree. Why? Because people want answers quickly and will favor a mostly correct answer that's fast and easy over a truly correct answer that takes more time and effort with everything but the most critical questions. And that's particularly true when the chatbot can tailor the length and complexity of its answer to the needs of the user, which internet searches do not do. There is a more abstract and further distant risk in which generative AI leads to a loss of objective truth that has to do with its training data sets. Because so much of our knowledge is now stored on the global digital repository of the internet, public information on the internet comprises the primary data sets for these AI systems, which is probably okay as long as that majority of information remains reliable, minimally biased, and written by humans. But what happens when generative AI begins to contribute more and more to the internet? What happens once 90% of news stories or Wikipedia articles are written primarily by bots which are not vigorously fact-checked because the volume of information is too great? Once false or biased information enters into a training data set, whatever bot is training on it will incorporate that false or biased information into its probabilistic analysis and then will spew out that info whenever it generates its own content, which then becomes part of training data sets for more and more bots, and so on and so forth. And because of the vast amounts of data that's being analyzed and the black box nature of what's going on under the hood of these systems, it may become impossible to determine how a specific false claim or biased perspective snuck in. More importantly, it may become impossible to remove it. At first, the challenge with removal may be a purely technical one, but at some point, as the reliability of public information is lessened, a human may not even be able to fully fact-check some potential piece of misinformation because every convenient resource one could use for fact-checking will itself have become tainted. So next is threat number 3, a loss of creativity. Why do humans produce creative works? They do so partly due to an inherent desire to express themselves, and partly to communicate ideas that are best conveyed via creative means. These motivations are not going anywhere. However, the ability to perfect a creative craft, whether it's art, music, writing, photography, dance, film, even video game design, it's predicated on the ability to financially afford the immense amount of time it requires. There also is incentive to create something that not only people enjoy, but also recognize as being great. What then happens when generative AI begins to compose music, write novels, or create digital art that is not only indistinguishable from human-produced works, but is actually superior, within seconds, for free? Because we are really close to that now with some forms of art. But AI can actually take it even further by designing the output to match the specific individual tastes of the one person who requested it. How can a human writer or musician possibly compete with that? Again, I'm not suggesting that humans will stop painting or playing instruments, but when AI floods the ecosystem with an infinite supply of free works, there will be much reduced incentive for a person to be the best, which itself would no longer be possible anyway without qualifying it as be the best human. In essence, the world will become filled with amateur creators. As an amateur musician myself, and as one might say, an amateur YouTube creator, I very much feel that there is still intrinsic value to amateur creativity. But unless a person is independently wealthy and has a profound internal drive, they will not be able to perfect the craft that is their creative outlet. The best amateur of anything is never as good as the best professional. Plus, once the world is full of AI-derived works, how will we even be able to identify the small minority that were created by people? I can imagine books and songs ending up with labels like certified human, but I don't see how it could be enforced. So in the end, while the quality of films, novels, and music may all seem to steadily increase, it's possible that none of what you experience in the future will be the creative output of a human being. And that brings me to threat number four, the most abstract one, but one which I feel is still a very real and kind of sad possibility: the death of culture. What exactly is culture? It's the shared set of social behaviors, knowledge, beliefs, arts, food, customs, and habits found in human societies. That these aspects of our life experience are shared is culture's most fundamental component. As AI becomes more powerful and more able to perfectly tailor its output to an individual user, that user's experience will become less and less shared with other people. To understand what I mean, let me start with a mundane but tangible example. When I was a teen in the US in the late 80s and early 90s, most homes more or less had four television stations: ABC, NBC, CBS, and a local station that played local sports and shows in syndication. When you cut away news and cheesy soap operas and game shows and the occasional movie, there were a limited number of television shows left. At any given time, maybe there were five sitcoms and five adult dramas of remotely decent quality. So the morning after a particularly great show had been on, you could go to school or work, and you were guaranteed to have friends who had seen the same episode, and you could talk about it. You could discuss what you liked or disliked. You could speculate where the show might go next. For me, that experience reached a peak during the first several years of The X-Files. When I was in college, and my friends would watch it together over dinner, and we would debate theories about the show's mythology. It was a very enjoyable, shared experience. Compare that with today, when we have more channels than I can count, and 30 or 40 decent quality television shows on at any given time, which are now all streaming, so can be watched anytime and in any order. They can be binged in a day or spread out over a year. From an individual standpoint, this is amazing that whenever I have some free time, I can hop on the computer or tablet and discover a new show that matches my tastes that I can watch immediately. But I rarely can find someone who has watched the same show at remotely the same time as me and is thus really engaged to talk about it. There's no discussions around the water cooler the morning after an episode of Andor or The Last of Us. I couldn't even name a friend of mine who has even seen these shows. Why? Because there are so many other great options to choose from. But yeah, even now, there are rare shows like Game of Thrones that seem to permeate through the public's collective consciousness. And I can hop online to places like YouTube and Reddit, and at least communicate with other people about the shows I love, even if the connection is virtual and with anonymous strangers. It's at least something. But then imagine how AI might allow this trend to continue to an extreme end. An AI could ask me to rate the last 20 shows I've seen, answer some brief questions about viewing preferences, and then it generates an entire original television series that is designed specifically for my tastes, which I will absolutely love, but which will never be viewed by another person. There will be no lively debates over pizza in the dorm lounge about the show's mythology. There will be no water cooler conversations at work. There are no YouTube videos to point out all the Easter eggs you missed, or Reddit flame wars over whether some trivial detail is or is not canon. There's just you sitting in your bed with your 42nd generation iPad, watching the greatest show you have ever seen alone. This is a relatively trivial concern compared to hypothetical extinction level events. But this phenomenon will not be limited to only television. The same thing will happen to books and music even sooner, and it may only be a handful of years away. The enjoyment of someone else's creativity, or something else's creativity, it will become a forever solo activity, and the loss of shared human experience extends beyond just conventional creative works. While culture also encompasses shared beliefs, when each individual is exposed to their own unique set of information, belief systems will no longer be connected to geography or a person's origin. In summary, as AI allows for information to be better and better tailored to the individual, culture as a shared collection of human customs, arts, beliefs, and even experiences is going to get lost. Do I think this outcome is around the corner? No, not for many aspects of it. But is it coming in a few decades? Maybe. And what makes me most sad about this possibility is that I think if it happens, I don't think most people will mind. It will be hard for our current existence to compete with a world in which AI presents each individual with a collection of products and information that is perfectly selected for their interests, tastes, and desires. When we lose those shared experiences, to some extent, we lose a shared language. Not a language of words per se, but a language of beliefs and expression and empathy for other people. So, what do I think we should do about this? You may have heard of the open letter asking for a pause on the development of more advanced AI for at least 6 months to ensure the development of safety protocols to prevent the more catastrophic of these scenarios. Although signed by many prominent folks in the field of AI, the idea that the governments of the world could impose this feels ridiculous. For example, here in the US, our leaders cannot even agree on naming a Washington, D.C. post office, let alone agree to new sweeping regulations of a science of which most don't have the faintest understanding. The octogenarians in DC get confused by the plot of The Matrix and don't understand the differences between email and Twitter DMs. They are not capable of debating the existential threats of AI. So what do we do instead? We could appeal to AI researchers' sense of humanity to voluntarily slow down their research to ensure it's done as safely and ethically and as thoughtfully as possible? Or should we shrug this off and live the best life we can now while considering an AI-driven technological singularity to be inevitable? Or do we convince ourselves that AI isn't a risk at all? It's just pseudoscientific alarmism. I don't know. 98% of my time, I just don't think about it. But the 2% when I do, I'd feel a little terrified. Perhaps there will be some significant but far from extinction level event triggered by AI, like a teen science project that escapes onto the internet and overloads a power grid or shuts down Facebook. Some incident that will demonstrate to the world the potential danger here that will sort of get everyone to start paying attention to this. Or maybe this is all just ill-informed rantings by someone who should stick to medicine. As anyone who has followed this channel for a while will hopefully recognize, I am far from an anti-technology Luddite stuck in the ways of the past. But I am really worried, not just because of how fast the technology is advancing, but because of how little we are thinking about the risks involved. We need to be thinking and talking more about this, not just about the extremes of Skynet on one hand and kids cheating on their homework on the other. We need to be talking about the risks that AI poses to objective truth and to our sense of a shared humanity. Those risks are real, and the consequences could be here within our lifetime. Do you have thoughts or concerns about artificial intelligence? Feel free to leave some comments below or ask questions. I look forward to hearing what other people have to say and other people's perspectives on this.